So people are still arriving there, but we'll kick off now. So hello and welcome to Engineers Ireland Donegal region Brexit event. My name is Jamie Corey and I'm the Vice Chair of the Donegal region, and I'll be the MC for this afternoon. So Brexit has been a topic of much speculation and debate over the last number of years. But now, as Brexit has become a reality, the Engineers Ireland Donegal region committee felt that it was important to review the post-Brexit business environment in the Northwest. We therefore reached out to Michael Tunney from Donegal Local Enterprise Office for an expert insight. Michael is the head of the Enterprise and Economic Development here in Donegal and based in the Leo office. He has over 25 years experience in working in areas of entrepreneur promotion, small and micro business development, and local economic development, as well as working with other agencies both in Ireland and Europe. Michael is a former non-executive director of Microfinance Ireland, and he's also a fellow of the Institute of Management Consultants and Advisors. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Michael for what will no doubt be a very informative presentation. All right, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. I was just wondering where you had pulled all that information from, actually. But yeah, so just my own background. Just coming up now. Okay, I would have started off life as a planner in the mid-80s in Donegal County Council initially, worked a bit over in Dundalk Town Council, then went to Kerry County Council as a first permanent job, and then moved into Shannon Development whenever they moved into North Kerry in the whole area of economic development, enterprise development, and that's where I got into that. I was around in Kerry County Council. I was the only planner and wrote the first, I think it was the first European investment kind of, it was the first round of monies that came when Albert Reynolds was around, over whether it was 6.8 million or 6.2 million or billion. So that was my first introduction then to Shannon Development. Then I moved to Leitrim after 6 years in Kerry, 4 years in Leitrim in the old county enterprise boards, and into my 25th year in Donegal as both enterprise head of or chief executive enterprise board, and 7 years now in the enterprise office. So that's my background. Look, I thought maybe useful just to a quick, I know some of you may be familiar and some may not be familiar what the local enterprise offices do. And I just want to put it in context, because rather than me saying I'm an expert, what we are is generalists in the main, bit like a planner, dare I say. So the local enterprise offices, there's one in each county, plus a few extras. There's 4 in Dublin, there's 3 in Cork. We are the government's first point of contact for anybody thinking about starting a business or existing business looking to expand. Our key roles then are enterprise promoting, so promoting entrepreneurship and enterprise at local level. So we would do work with second level schools in particular around the whole enterprise. I think in April now we'll have the county final of the schools enterprise program that's run within each county and on a national level. And then the most important bit is that whole enterprise development, working to get new startups in the county and with existing businesses to help them expand. And that's through a range of supports from one-to-one advice, specialized mentoring, training, management development. So there's training around, let's say, small business accounts, start your own business training, and then a lot of management or capability development programs. They wouldn't be sort of on their national framework, because a lot of owner managers and businesses are not interested in that. They want, I suppose, business related programs that adds to their own capability. We do a lot around networks, and I will touch on something later on in relation to the engineering network in the county. And then we provide direct financial assistance to startups and expansion, and also a point of access to other funding such as Agile funding, which is funding from Enterprise Ireland, loan finance from Microfinance Ireland, and directing companies to other sources of finance such as Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland's Intertrade Ireland supports Enterprise Ireland depending on the size of the company. So it's a broad remit. That's our core. And then it was mentioned there, Jamie, that we involve ourselves quite a bit in European projects. So currently we're involved in an innovation program led by a partner out of Southern Italy. We're involved in a circular economy program led by a company, an organization out of Greece. And we're involved in an internationalization program led with a UK partner. And we're currently developing our own little network of organizations in Europe around clustering and cluster development. So we kind of have other things. I mean, that's what keeps work interesting, the additional stuff. That's just my experience. So that's kind of what the local enterprise offices do. Their core staff complement here isn't funded by, and we're funded by the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, who also funds IDA and funds Enterprise Ireland. So while we're now part of the local authority, all of our budget for all of our supports comes from the department. And I, as head of enterprise, have control of that budget. Our staff budget, our core staff budget in Donegal covers 5 key staff, myself, 2 executives and 2 admins. So that's a core staff of 5. I have a staff total of about 13. Others are funded from a lot of other areas where we've pulled money from, and some short-term funding because of COVID and Brexit. So it's kind of a hybrid. It's within the local authority, funded by the department, reports to local authority, reports to the department, and reports to Enterprise Ireland. So it's a very much of a hybrid organisation. So in the context of Brexit, and I know this was around the effects of Brexit, I thought maybe I'd just sort of say be sort of pre-January 1st of this year. So for almost 4 years, we have been planning for Brexit, and every time there was a deadline, we would have found with our client base, there would have been a mad rush for supports, and there would have been an increase in inquiries about what if, what should I do, what should I not do. And then every time a deadline was kicked down the road, the businesses just said, okay, it's not an issue yet. And then 12 months later, there would be a rush. So there was kind of a reluctance there to engage and address some of the issues that were being identified. And there was a lot of uncertainty. And you would have heard a lot of business people over that period of time on national radios and TV and all that saying, look, too much uncertainty. Once we know, we can address what the challenges are. From day one, we had always said the critical thing around Brexit, soft or hard, is there was going to be customs. And that is and was the reality. So customs was the one sure thing. And probably in that context, one of the things that we have been involved in through the local enterprise offices, but also Enterprise Ireland and Intertrade Ireland, and indeed an organisation called SkillNets, has been delivering training in the whole area of customs. Again, if I don't know the age profile of those of you who are logging on today, but when I worked in Dundalk as a planner, the biggest issue was the control of the customs huts from the northern bridge in Dundalk to the border up to Newry. There was probably a mile, 2 mile of customs huts and customs units, and they would pop up overnight. There was caravans. So just trying to manage that, because that was the level of demand. And there were some very significant, I'd say, fortunes made on that for that period of time. When that went, so did the expertise. So one of the biggest challenges for companies in the lead up to January 1st was actually finding customs agents. And that's still an issue. So there was reluctance, uncertainty, and there was a lack of knowledge. And indeed, one of the large consultancy houses got in there and were providing a lot of the training. But what they did is they acquired a small customs agent, and she and her other staff became the experts internally in that organization. So we were doing a lot of planning and preparation with businesses. There was a lot of events. Some of you may have been aware of a couple of significant events. There was one major event maybe about 3 years ago in LYIT in Letterkenny, when we had ministers and various speakers. We had now the Vice President of the EU Commission, Mairead McGuinness was there, and others, just trying to raise awareness. But all of the time, there seemed to be a reluctance, as I say, within businesses just to grasp the inevitability of Brexit, whatever it was going to be. Thankfully, it turned out not to be as hard a Brexit as right up to the last minute we thought it was going to be. But customs is still an issue. It is still one we get questions of. And interesting, since January 1, it is one customs issues, but not significant issues, are the things that have been most common. I think to date, Brexit really hasn't impacted yet because of what we were hearing from our client base and others. Businesses were preparing. They were either stockpiling the raw materials coming in from or through the UK, or they were sending their product over to the UK for distribution over there in advance. So what we're hearing a lot of is a sort of a lack of preparedness of UK businesses around Brexit and the paperwork. We're hearing a lot about, just simple errors in the completion of the customs declarations, wrong tariff codes, wrong codes here, wrong reference number there, not enough of that. And the other issue I think that has come through is that there is an opportunity whenever people are doing their customs to have an arrangement with revenue in relation to like doing advance payments, open an account and put an amount of money in there from which they will draw and the revenue will draw on as they do their clearances. Of not budgeting for that or not allowing for that. So that's some of the stuff that's sort of a pre-Brexit. So touched on this. I mean, the interesting thing about customs training is, because I've sat in a few days on this, is it is the ultimately whether you use a, I don't know if anybody doing this for maybe some clients, irrespective of whether you use a customs agent or not, it is the responsibility of the business or the owner of the business to get it right. And if you get it wrong, you can't blame anybody. And revenue and customs won't hold anybody else responsible other than the owner of the business. So if there's wrong information, it's down to you. So the other thing then we have over the last 2 years been providing in relation to Brexit, we would historically, when I mentioned our supports there, we would have had subvented mentoring support. So it would be normally at a subvented rate of 80%. We made it available at 100%. Similarly, we did the same for COVID related mentoring. So, and mentoring is not consultancy. The idea is that, you may be familiar with the idea, is the mentor goes in and helps the person in the business address the challenge or the issue, but it's about imparting the learning. So when that issue arises again, he or she does not require somebody else. No need to come pick up the phone again and say, you know, I have the same issue again, can you help me? They're meant to pick up, learn from the mentor and be able to do it. The mentees may be able to implement it the next time around. So for me, the effects of Brexit, and it's probably more indicative how I give some examples. I mean, there's obviously uncertainty and a slowdown in investment decisions. So for example, prior to Brexit, we would have been dealing in our office, you would have a couple of businesses who were looking at, there was one actually from Northern Ireland who was thinking in anticipation of Brexit of investing an expansion into Donegal. And I'd say over the last 4 years, I probably had 6 different conversations with the guy. And it was that not knowing the exact detail and the exact outcome of Brexit, he kept deferring and still hasn't decided. I mean, as of last 2 weeks ago, he still was unsure because he reckoned it needs another 9 months before he knows what to do and how it will settle down. So there was that investment in both expansion, as in maybe setting up afresh, or just investment in capital. Obviously with Brexit, minimal, you know, there's additional costs in relation to customs. Whether you do it yourself, whether you're buying software to do it, or whether you're paying an agent, there's a cost implication on that. There's also then cost implications in relation to the maybe additional time a lorry's on a load on the road, and if you're paying somebody for that, there's additional costs of that. So those costs get added on, and ultimately they get added on to the customer, whoever he or she or the company may be. It has forced businesses also to look at some of their existing business models. So in particular, where they're buying their raw materials from, and a number of the engineering companies, as you know, a lot of them will be buying steel in from the UK, and you know, ramifications of that for them. Also, we have quite a number of food producing, agri-food producing added value companies in Donegal. There's a cost implication there. Some of them are still working through that, what it means. So bringing the raw milk across from the north, processing it here and maybe selling it back in. So there's that, but also then there's that whole issue of just of, you'll hear talk about the country of origin, which I've sat on 2 seminars on it, and I'm still not clear as to what actually it means, because it can be not necessarily where it started from, but it might be where the last bit of added value was from. So again, it's that uncertainty. A few interesting ones. I dealt with somebody who basically had a company in Donegal that was providing a consultancy service, as I picked it up. So they were offering a service, so where there was the old problem with the decaying blocks, and they were taking samples, and it was going over to the UK, and the UK or entity was doing the analysis and certifying the results. As it turns out, they're certifying to a British certification. So the entity back in Ireland that would be taking those and accepting those, local authority would be basically was saying that's not suitable anymore. So they were kind of caught. So, the advice we had to give them was either you find an alternative provider in continental Europe, or you get your UK provider to achieve an EU certification level. Similarly, I had somebody on there only a couple of weeks ago, and their issue was, they needed a CE certified product. Their UK provider said wasn't applying anymore in the UK and couldn't provide it. So again, his option was, he finds an alternative supplier, or he forces his provider in the UK to get that certification. And ultimately, probably, I think in discussion, but it was, he needed quickly to find an alternative supplier of that product from mainland Europe. So that alternative source of products and certification are things that, companies are finding, and it's small things. They were kind of pretty unique kind of ones, because again, when I brought one of those actually to the Standards Authority, they wanted to know, they hadn't come across it, and they wanted to know what the outcome would be, because it was one of those they hadn't come across. The other one, obviously, in the context of Ireland, is the issues around the land bridge, taking products through the UK. Issues around that, again, are customs and the certification, and this issue that if your product is part of a load, so if you're part of a pallet or part of a container, and there's some other element of that container that certification isn't correct on, the whole thing gets sitting until it's all sorted out. So those are the kind of things that adds to time, and you add time, you add costs. A big push at the moment from government and to ourselves in Enterprise Ireland is supposed to help companies identify alternative markets other than the UK. I think figures last year in relation to the exports, showed that the UK, I think, was down. I think we're quoting nationally was somewhere about 8%. But the push is there to try and get us to help companies to be thinking more about exporting, but in particular exporting beyond the UK. But for, I suppose, cultural reasons, socioeconomic reasons, historical reasons, the UK is our nearest neighbour. It's same language. So all of those ties. It's an easy market. So it's a difficult one for companies to turn their back on. But I would say probably I should have said, from perspective of us in the local enterprise office, we have a core, we call it portfolio clients. So those clients who would have received grant aid from us in the last 10 years. So they're added value manufacturing or services with the potential to export. That's the definition. When we do our annual survey, last year we had 2 questions around, one about Brexit, one about COVID. For most companies, COVID was more an issue than Brexit. But we also asked questions around their level of exporting and their level of exporting into the UK. So of those that were exporting and exporting into the UK, only 10% on average, some were higher, some were lower, but on average, the mean was at 10% of sales were going into the UK. So when you look at it in that context, you could probably realize maybe this is why Brexit was not that big an issue for a lot of the small and micro enterprises. And again, we are a county of, depending on what 92 to 97% of our companies or businesses are micro enterprises employing less than 10. So of those that are granted, only 10% of their sales on average into the UK. Brexit is probably not as big a challenge for most of them, because they can make that 10% up somewhere else. And as 1 or 2 companies said to me running up to December last year, in the short term, if we haven't got a solution, we're not that far from the border anyway, So, there'd just be a practical solution to it found. Obviously for Donegal, because of our fishing heritage and having Killybegs and Greencastle and other fishing ports, that's consequences for the fishing and the fish quotas and being able to fish in the Irish Sea and English waters is significant. And I mentioned earlier on the whole agri-food sector. But again, so far, it hasn't really hit home, I don't think, and it remains to be seen. So like the effects, as I said, for us in the local enterprise office and for our client base, I would only judge it on the level of calls and inquiries. I could say in the first 6 weeks now of January and February, if we have received 10 calls in relation to Brexit, that's about the height of it. It's not an issue to date, and it remains to be seen probably I would think by April, May, we'll know whether Brexit is, as big a concern as we all thought it might be for our businesses. And again, I suppose it's because it's interesting. I was on a call this morning, national network, and it seemed to be a similar story around the country, except for a few companies further south. And I think because of we're in the border counties and used to cross-border trade historically anyway, and maybe while there might not have been customs, we would have been used to that of going across borders and the familiarity with it, and having probably more access into the UK market than you would if you were down in Cork or Kerry or Limerick or Tipperary. I think for some southern companies, they seem to be struggling with it a little bit more. So like I'm not, I mean, to me, Brexit has not been the challenge, and hopefully it won't be that we thought it might have been. And maybe because companies maybe did the preparation and had a certain amount of it, readiness done in advance. And as things work their way through, as I keep saying, most businesses, if there's a way of doing it, they'll find a solution. And I think that's how they operate in relation. They'll operate in relation to Brexit. That's what they did, post 2008. A lot of them found a way of surviving. And they'll find a way, because if business has to be done, businesses tend to find a way of doing it. So really, Jamie, I've on the Brexit thing, that's about me. I'm happy to take some questions, but I thought it might be useful as well just to outline, because it is to engineers I'm talking. We have been engaging with the broader engineering. I suppose really we're talking about manufacturing engineering in the county for quite intensively for the last 4 or 5 years. We have a little thing we call a model we brought in from the UK, from Brighton University in 2008, actually, just this time 12 years ago, or 13 years ago, when things just went belly up. It's a peer learning group. So we've had 18 engineering companies on that for the last 3 years. We have, it's a monthly meeting where they kind of share opportunities, share challenges, and learn from each other. We have done some work with them in the last 6 months, 9 months, in expanding that into looking at an engineering cluster. And in that context, I mentioned earlier on, we're doing some work with 4 international sort of partners, I'd call them at this stage, but it's exploratory stage with an agency in southern Portugal, northern Germany, southern Finland, and in northern Poland, around their experience of managing clusters. And in that, there's a couple of engineering clusters, there's a couple of marine clusters, there's a food cluster, tourism cluster, there's technology as well. So it's really about us developing our capability to work with the engineering cluster. The reason we're doing it is because there's a couple of engineering companies there that really have ambition to grow, not only themselves, but to try and grow the sector in the county. We all would, so in Donegal would know of EI Engineering. Some of you would know of Inishowen Engineering. Like Inishowen Engineering, when Michael came to us, I wasn't too long in the county here. He was just a young buck, had done his leaving cert and was setting up a cleaned out silage pit that his father had, and in the farm. He's probably now, if anybody knows that he should have moved into his new plant. At this time last year, we were down visiting it. I mean, he had put more than a couple of football fields in it. It's a huge plant. So again, it's grown very significantly over the years. So a couple of people in engineering then who really want to raise the bar. And one of the things we've been talking to them about is the current challenges. And it's not just common engineering, but a big challenge in the engineering sector seems to be skills, across the sector, as well as in the whole sort of metal fabrication and the welding and that, but just the general skills within engineering, and also in the design. And one of the things we're trying to do is trying to position engineering, and I suppose really that manufacturing and engineering as a more credible option for young people when they're looking at their options going forward. So we've been talking to them. We've been talking to, and it's something we'd be interested in talking to Engineers Ireland about too. We've been, because I think you've got some videos around engineering and the attractiveness of it as a profession, about possibly doing a couple of short videos there about positioning the sector and making it attractive to parents as much as it is to kids. So we're looking probably off next week, myself and Ivan in our office are presenting to the engineering group and saying, here's our plan. I've accessed close to $250,000 for it for the next 3 years. So it's something we're kind of hoping will bring fruition and add a bit more to the broader engineering sector within the county. So, Jimmy, that's me.
That's great. That's very informative, especially the way I suppose you just directed your expertise towards the engineering sector. I suppose, Michael, do you think lockdown that we're currently in will have like a delayed effect on people approaching you, or is it just the SMEs seem to be managing by themselves?
Oh no, far from. I mean, I know it was a very somber couple of months when things really locked down. Let's say from April, May, June, that first lockdown, and our offices closed here for whatever reason. All of the phones in the office came through to my mobile phone. I was logging somewhere between 40 to 65 calls a day. And as a result of that, and a result of what they call the continuity vouchers, which was brought in by government last March, and we put through about 800 of those. A much broader cohort of business in the county became familiar with the local enterprise office. You know, historically, with a lot of the smaller manufacturing, but this was everything from creches to hairdressers to accountants to solicitors to contractors, the works. Very familiar with, and even just this afternoon there now, I spoke to somebody, hairdresser, a contractor, a food manufacturer, within an hour and a half. So I think the online bit as well has made us a lot more accessible. So when we do, all of our information sessions, we do a monthly information session on the kind of supports available. Historically, that would have been people coming into the office here. You might have got 9 or 10. The one that's planned for, I think, for this Friday, we have 28. So it's just, and it's interesting because it's maybe that, in starting a business, there's the push and the pull factor, but definitely there's a push factor there. We're getting an increase in the level of inquiries about startups. Historically, over the last number of years, we would actually more people expanding their existing business than those starting a business, but there's a lot of people interested in starting a business. When we put our Start Your Own Business program, we have 6 of those running during the year, maybe 7. We get 60, I think it was 62 expressions of interest for the first program. So to me, it is that maybe push factor, but definitely I think the use of technology, familiarity, people have got what online, email, we're much more accessible, I think. Sometimes you can, as well as even the email, because as well as the general email, the office specific office, the info at comes into my email. So on average, there's 5 inquiries a day by email, 5 good inquiries a day by email every day. So again, you're talking 30 to 35 a week just by email coming in, inquiries as well. So yeah, no, I mean, people have got familiar with it, and it has definitely helped.
Right. So
rather than hindered.
It appears as if then really kind of people have got ahead of the game. There's been a high level of engagement with yourselves, and maybe the SME companies are in a good position with regards to their preparation for Brexit. Then, judging by what you were saying there, well, you pointed out there about the SMEs, the startups. Would you have any tips for the startups, that are trying to access maybe, I suppose, Europe? More so than the UK now, as maybe one of their biggest sources of income. Would there be any tips that you would?
No, you see, for startups, it's all about, I think, it's all about the promoter or the promoter's team, and also it's all about their ambition. And just cite an example, end of last year, well, September, we kicked off with a pilot, which was we call it a pre-accelerator for female startups. For the first time ever, we actually opened it out to our diaspora. So we had 3 of the 11 participating teams were based overseas. And actually the one that won the initial investment was a girl from Buncrana, but living currently in Barcelona. And interesting, most of those had a product or a service that had the potential for export. But that's how we had framed it. I mean, if there was 41 applications and 11 were selected. So the ones that probably weren't selected were the ones that were more looking at local services. So there's always a strong demand from people looking at local service startups, because again, there's low cost of entry. you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. That local services provide a very useful service and employ an awful lot of people. I suppose the policy is that we need to, the national policy pushes, you want businesses that are generating revenue coming into the state. So it's rather than keeping the same euro going around, you're adding another euro from outside. So I think, you know, it's, and again, we're looking at starting just the tenders to go through, a tech accelerator for Donegal. And again, we've been talking to some of the tech people in the county to try and get aim at existing businesses, large businesses, and people with new ideas. So we'll see what that would be, but it's really down to the ambition. And it's the same. I always would use the analogy, having done a bit of run in the past. You know, it's like somebody saying, I want to run 10K. Well, most people can cover 10K walking. But if you want to run it, do you want to do it in like 40 minutes and 35 minutes, or are you happy doing it in 55 minutes? You know, the quicker you want to do it, the more work you're going to have to do. The more successful, or if you want to achieve, you know, an income of 100,000 and turnover of 1 million, 100,000 for yourself, then that's going to take a whole lot more work than if you want 25 grand of an income.
Absolutely.
So it really comes down to what do you want and how hard are you willing to work. But there's definitely still a huge level of startups. But just on that, I don't want to go say, we looked at some figures that VisionNet do on an annual basis in relation to levels of startups. And obviously, you know, naturally the highest level of startups is in Dublin and the greater Dublin area. The next tier like is Waterford, Cork, Limerick and Galway. You know, you see all the reasons why it would be. And then you're into sort of third tier or larger counties like ourselves. I think it might have been ourselves, Kerry, Tipperary, you know. But then if you're not a large county with a large population and you're removed from those areas, so the Midlands in particular had probably the lowest level of startups, you know, Longford, Roscommon, Leitrim. So this is an argument I was making this morning. The problem is with national initiatives, and they're generally Dublin centric, so their policies are and the supports are based on what the story is in Dublin, and that bears no resemblance to a Donegal or a Longford or a Leitrim, you know.
Yeah, okay. Well, based on what we just mentioned, the border region, have you come across any new EU grants or business supports, well, post Brexit, that have kind of come through that'd be worth noting for SMEs in the county?
I suppose that, no, not new ones, but there was ones came in, I suppose, in the context of Brexit. I mean, you have in Enterprise Ireland, you had grant aids there for, you know, your assessment, you know, the Brexit. Well, it was a ready reckoner. It was terribly general, in my opinion. But also, then they have a grant scheme there. If you are a business and you need assistance to do your customs, they will grant aid. I think it's up to 9,000 the cost of a person, and they also will grant aid some of the software. Interesting in talking to some of the, again, it was an engineering company, and I would have thought they were quite significant in relation to their sales of the UK. The software companies that they went looking to get quotes for basically said the level of transactions wouldn't justify us selling you your software or software. So they were kind of caught what they would do. Intertrade Ireland have funding for companies. So if you want to, and it's 100% up to 2,250 euros, I think it is, the equivalent of 2,000 sterling. So if you want a consultant to come in and look at your business in the context of Brexit, or identify, might be looking at your logistics or looking at your sourcing or looking at your, you know, anything to do with your currency and how you manage that, they'll cover that to that maximum 100%. Intertrade Ireland have a couple of good supports for cross-border, but also in relation to Brexit. So
there's assistance there, Michael, is what you're saying in a nutshell, you know.
There's a lot of assistance. I mean, sometimes, you know, it's I mean, in the beginning, in the context of at the moment and COVID, there are so many schemes, and you know, they have a scheme for this, and then there's another scheme in case somebody falls through that, and then there's another scheme in case they fall through that and that, you know, and then you just get lost.
Yeah, so for our members in the local SMEs, really, it's a case of, I suppose, reaching out and getting in contact and trying to figure out what would be most suitable for them with regards to those kind of funding and maybe schemes and projects that they could maybe.
In addition to that, Jamie, as well, I mean, like I mentioned, SBCI, Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, they brought in, you know, COVID loans, but a lot in Brexit loans. So theirs is like the COVID ones. I think the Brexit are unsecured up to $500,000, starting at 25,000 up to $500,000 unsecured. Now you apply through the commercial bank, but at 4%, it's quite attractive. Microfinance similarly had a Brexit loan and a COVID loan. Theirs is more towards the small SMEs that are, or micros actually, less than 10s, that may have difficulty getting access bank financing. But again, if you apply through the local enterprise office and they're approved, and again, that's available to any type of business. I mean, I've secured loans for, let's say, an accountancy practice to get a loan from Microfinance Ireland, right? So professional services in there as well, depending what you want to do. If you apply through ourselves and successful, it's 1% less than if you apply to them normally. Again, it's Microfinance Ireland. So yeah, you know, so there's been a lot of new products came on to try and help companies address some of the issues.
Yeah. Another question came in there. Do you think Brexit will have an impact on the retention of recruitment of engineering skill sets in the Donegal region?
I don't think Brexit will. It's interesting in talking to that all through last year when we kind of put on our one-to-one meetings or our monthly meetings on hold. We used to have meetings every 2 weeks by Zoom. And interesting, the engineering companies were kind of reluctantly saying, you know, I hate to admit it, but they were very busy throughout all of last year. So I think that skill set, I don't think that sector is suffering too much. There has been an issue, I think, around what COVID has done to some of it, in that COVID has probably forced some people in that sector to rethink, is this the career I want? I don't know, a number of them, just before Christmas, a number were citing that they'd lost staff because staff had reassessed what they wanted to do. And someone had gone off to pursue a different career and someone had gone back to further education to see, just because it felt, okay, no, actually, I haven't been, you know, taking time out. This maybe is not what I want, you know. But I don't think Brexit will have that. Now, again, it'll remain to be seen, I suppose, in the context of, I think, how Ireland would compete with the UK for investment, which in turn will have a knock-on effect in probably construction projects, which in turn will have a knock-on effect into engineering, both in design, you know, mechanical, all the rest, and in the construction related. So I think that's a longer term one. We need to see how it plays out. Because again, we're selling the Northwest, Donegal, sort of Derry, that city region as one that's a region that's two sides of the border, is unique, can offer people dual location, et cetera, you know, we need to see whether that'll pay off as well. So, you know, time will tell, I think, you know.
Yeah, so basically the effects of Brexit and I suppose maybe COVID combined won't really be realised now, maybe for another couple of months. Then
yeah, I think long term, or sorry, not long term, but over the next 3 years, I think it'll take us that bit of time to recover from COVID, provided we can get out of it with the vaccines. But I think it'll take it a while. I mean, and I had said from early days, from looking at all of those business continuity vouchers as they came in here, and I had a glance at most of them. And back last year, I was saying I wouldn't have been surprised if 40% of those businesses never reopened as a result of COVID, you know, because a lot of our particularly a lot of our micro businesses in our county are, they're almost, well, they're probably not managed on a commercial basis to maximize the profit. They're almost like a vocation for the owner manager, and she or he manages in that way, and they're really not giving themselves a significant working wage. If the figures are even assuming they're understated by 20% at least, they're still, you know, they're questionable whether they could take the hit of COVID and continue and reopen again this year.
Well, we'll have to look and just see how things go in that regard.
Yeah.
See, Michael, from the point of view of marketing strategies and media strategies, would there be anything that would kind of be, I suppose, beneficial, you know, to companies post-Brexit, like maybe, I suppose, from the point of view of Engineers Ireland, the committee we're talking about, you know, would there be any, like Facebook and looking into those kind of ways of advertising? Is there any kind of preferential advertising that you would kind of see as being beneficial to the companies? For companies?
Well, the one thing we've been pushing, I mean, this is national strategy as well as local strategy, is to try and get more businesses to be online and to be e-commerce enabled online. The challenge along with that is that, and I'm not an expert at all in this, I'm old school, right? So I leave that to some of the younger staff in here. But the biggest challenge I would see with a lot of the companies that have gone there is they go online, they develop their e-commerce capability or their ability to sell product or service online, and then they forget about, well, that's only getting started. That's like buying the football boots, right? They don't see that this happens a lot with marketing, that it needs to be an ongoing process. You know, we all know that with websites, a website's fine, but right, so it's current today, but this day next week, it's a week out of date. This day next month, it's a month out of date. So there is that thing about making the commitment to actually even the simplest of a digital strategy and implementing that. And whether that is then you link, whether you have a website or not, if it's Facebook, are you using Facebook, or are you going to use what other platforms are going to use? And it depends who you want to engage with. So I mean, again, if it's professional, I think LinkedIn is still probably one of the stronger ones in relation to professional. But for business, you know, and depending on the type of business, it'll depend on what kind of platform and how you're going to do it. We have the same thing in the public sector. You know, we're all great at websites, but actually making them work for us and making them do it. I mean, the Donegal County Council is looking currently at rebranding itself. We manage our website in the local enterprise office. It's kind of limited because we hang off a website, but the other 30 Leos hang off as well. And it's control of the centre, so we have a certain level of control and other things. So we did something recently. We've launched a new website called Donegal Stories, because the national one wouldn't carry 31 stories, 31 videos of 31 clients in Donegal. So we had to do something different and then tie it back to our own website. But it is all about, to me, it's the consistency of the campaign. So if you're putting it as an association, like if you're doing, I would say, yeah, if you're doing that, but then you have to have somebody who's going to keep plugging it. You know, keep getting the message out there, keeping the content relevant, keeping it current.
So no matter what strategy you go with, you're going to have to keep evaluating it and keep updating it.
Absolutely, and as I keep saying here as well, Jamie, I mean, to be willing enough to admit, okay, that's not working. Yeah. So let's change it. Let's do something different, or let's find out. And there's always good, and this is why I always find European projects extremely good. You see what other regions are doing, or other agencies are doing, other businesses are doing. And you can, I'm a bit of a magpie. You know, I took that thing in from Brighton, you know, because I came across a guy 20 years ago who'd give a lecture, and I got a chat to him, and then we got talking. And over the years, he did some work here. We went over to Brighton. We took that program over. So you kind of pick things up and you adapt them to your own, you know, if it works. And then if it doesn't work the way they'd worked, well, make it work for yourself, you know.
Yeah, I suppose that question was really kind of related to, you know, putting a significant investment into some form or some strategy, and then maybe it not working out, just like you said. If it's not working out, it sounds as if the advice is to cut it and try and look at something else instead. But I know from the point of view, a couple of people we've been speaking to, you know, they've invested in doing the websites just like you've said, and you know, they're not really sure how successful that's actually been, and there is a significant investment just to get it online itself, never mind to upkeep it, etc. So I suppose that kind of was maybe where that question came from.
Yeah, but I think as well, Jamie, I mean, and I'm not again, but from what I, you know, because I ask staff all the time. So like there are simple tools, if you have your website or whatever you're doing online, that these things are all measurable. You know, there's plugins, and it's, again, it's when you have that to look at them and say, well, tell you what, well, look, there's a website and there's nobody landing on it, or it's landing, but they're, you know, they're leaving it within 10 seconds. There's something wrong. So, you know, everything is measurable online, much more than I ever thought actually, but they are. So, I mean, like, you know, when people log on to this, I'm sure you can go behind this and say, you can see how many 39 people actually, but you should be able to say if people log off, whether they're on for 5 minutes or 45 minutes, or whether in and whether out. So all of that is there.
Yeah.
Most of us don't have the time, though, you know, to just to analyze the data and make decisions, informed decisions.
And say there in Leo, for instance, would there be anybody that would be able to assist with small and medium enterprises, maybe if they were looking for somebody to help them with, for instance, a website or a strategy in that regard? Yeah,
we have two people. Grace in our office has been delivering and managing. There's a scheme called Trading Online Vouchers, so it's available to any small micro enterprise less than 10, less than 2 million of turnover, provided you're not excluded under the NACE codes, and there's a list of those. But again, it has to be either developing or enhancing an existing website so that it's e-commerce enabled. So you have to be either proposing to sell a product or a service via your website. Right, can't be a brochure website.
It's not really applicable for a startup, for instance. It's more like somebody who's been established and is looking to
do and you have to be trading for at least 6 months.
Right, and you're looking to regenerate, etc.
Yeah. So, but if you're existing business, again, it's a national scheme. Huge demand on it last year. I think we approved 408, 410 approvals last year, mainly because it went to 90%. It's now back at 50%. But again, if you were an engineering business or consultancy, there's nothing to stop you if you were going to offer, like, you know, your pricing, you know, pricing a job online or whatever it is, or doing your consultations online, and people had to charge for the consultations online. You know, that's eligible provided you're hitting the other criteria. That actually trading online voucher, not only does it cover actually the cost of making your website e-commerce enabled, or it can cover putting on your payment system. It can cover the development of developing a digital strategy, and then cover the cost of implementing a digital strategy. It can also cover the cost of just IT consultancy to help you in that process. So it's quite broad. It'll also cover photography. There's some limits in that: photography, videography, as parts of. So that's available to any. And again, it's been every type of business in the county is available of that. Any kind of micro enterprise.
So we've touched on a lot of the businesses, and I suppose we kind of more of the construction kind of orientated and the small and medium enterprise. What about consultancy? Have you noticed any, or have you had any inquiries with regards to difficulty for cross-border consultants, such as consultants in Letterkenny, maybe working up the north? Has there been any issue? I know you highlighted there now with regards to the standards, but
yeah.
Any other kind of complications to date?
No, none whatsoever. And like we would be, as well as using some consultants out of the north, we would have Donegal consultants we know are doing work in the north. And then we're involved in it's a £16 million project actually between ourselves, the local enterprise offices, the local enterprise agencies in Northern Ireland, Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands, and Intertrade Ireland are all the partners in it. So that is very much consultants to providing a service on a cross-border basis to businesses and companies both sides of the border working together. So there has to be stage 4 of it. There has to be a company in, let's say, south of the border, company north of the border, or in Scotland, and then working with a third level in either side. Of been no issues whatsoever to date. I just had a meeting yesterday. It wasn't highlighted as an issue at all, as a challenge so far by anybody.
Yeah, so you haven't really kind of, especially with a project that size, you haven't come across any major hang-ups that might be pitfalls for the local consultants or businesses that
No more. The only issue that's come through in the early days, I mean, you've heard a lot, I'm sure, is the treatment of that, but that's one you need to talk to your accountant. I always say about it's not come to the local enterprise office because we're not accountants and we're not VAT experts. But no, it hasn't been an issue. I personally think on the whole service area, neither Europe nor the UK will ever want to go near that. I've spoken to a few people in customs and that, and they were saying, look, it's just so complicated. To try and open that and get a handle on that, there's just so many variations of every type of service, you could never account for it. So I don't think there's an appetite there. So I don't think it's one in the short term I'd be worried about at all.
Okay.
That's just an opinion.
No, that's what the discussion is about. I suppose we don't really have any. We've expired all the questions now, and I suppose we've gone to 45-50 minutes there now. So I'd like to thank you very much, Michael, for taking the time out to go through this presentation with us on behalf of the Donegal region. It was excellent, and some great tips and advice there from in the Q&A as well. It's been excellent. I suppose if anybody has any further kind of questions that we haven't addressed, maybe they can send them through to us or through to Clive Road, and maybe we'll be able to send them on to Michael or address them in some way, shape or form. But other than that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. There'll be another couple of Brexit events. There's 4 in total coming up straight out of Clyde Road. But we were looking to specifically look at the Donegal region in this particular one. And Michael's been quite helpful in that regard. And
Jamie may just come in if your members may be interested. Some of you will know we do an annual Enterprise Week. So Enterprise Week's coming up the first week of March, the 1st to the 5th. And on the Wednesday, we have a Brexit event, or we're calling it Beyond Brexit. So our key speaker there, our main speaker is Tony Connolly, the RTE correspondent over in Brussels. And then we have with somebody who's going to talk about logistics. We have a food company in Donegal talking, what do you call it, the unique dairy company over there in Killigordon. They're bringing in a lot of the raw material from the north, doing added value products. 85% of their product is sold into the UK. So it's a case study saying how they have achieved. So it might be interesting for people if they were interested in that. It's very much a Brexit specific event, so accessible through our website.
What we might do is we might get a link off you, Michael, and we'll put
Yeah.
it up on our website as well. We'll collaborate with you on that one.
Yeah.
All right then. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and a special thanks to Michael. And hopefully you've got a little bit from today's webinar, and hopefully we'll have a few more coming up now in the future for the Donegal region. All right, we'll go with that, and we'll sign off at that. Okay.